Good morning. You just heard Sharon, Abreu, and Michael Hurwicz playing, and a clue for where they're from is the name of that piece, Olga and Buck Bay. So I'm going to let you ponder that for a second, a little trivia. Where is Olga Bay? Where is Buck Bay? And I am the celebrant today, Kevin Allen Schmid, music director here. Reverend Paul Beckel is away. His father-in-law and his wife Jane's father, Michael Brunt, has been faced with very serious medical challenges just lately and has now entered hospice care. So let's keep Michael Brunt, his wife Mary Jane, Reverend Paul, and Jane, and their family in our hearts. We're now going to go ahead with the prelude. So please welcome Sharon Abreu and Michael Hurwicz.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to be back with you, Bob. We're going to do a song called Give Yourself to Love by Kate Wolf, and love to have you sing along. Keep on firing? I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, hang on a second. I'm sorry. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind friends all gathered round, something I would say. What brings us together here has blessed us all today. Love has made a circle that holds us all inside, where strangers are as family, loneliness can't hide. You must give yourself to love, if love is what you're after. Open up your hearts to the tears and laughter and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love.
I've walked these mountains in the rain. I've learned to love the wind. I've been up before the sunrise to watch the day begin. I always knew I'd find you, just never did know how. Like sunshine on a cloudy day, you stand before me now.
And give yourself to love. Love is what you're after.
Open up your hearts to
Tears and laughter and give yourself to love.
give yourself to love.
Love is born in fire, it's planted like a seed. Love can't give you everything, but it gives you what you
for singing along. I think the music that they're going to present today will be familiar to many of you, as are Sharon and Michael already. They don't need to be introduced. Have you figured out where Olga and Buck Bay are? Just on that island that we can see, so very close to us, it yet takes so long to get there from here. They live on Orcas Island, and Jeannie and I just discovered that the renter in their basement apartment is our lifelong friend from Montana. So we are connected more deeply than we realized. Sharon and Michael have made a life of singing, songwriting, changing the world. They are activists in the best sense. They have entered schools, they have educational programs, written books, they are in books. There's a book that I was very excited to get called A Song to Save the Salish Sea. And directing the choir of the Salish Sea, that was an interesting topic to me, that singing can bring about change in the world, that we can change the world through singing. And Michael and Sharon were examples in the book of having done that so successfully, that through music we have the new activism. Back in the day, in the 60s and so forth, with the civil rights movement, this became a thing, that you can change the world through the power of song. And nowadays, it's harder to bring people together on a political issue like civil rights, but the latest front for changing the world is the environment. It's our seventh principle. And so we are hoping that we can get some profundity, some inspiration from Sharon and Michael's lifelong work today. Michael will read the reading and Sharon will light the chalice, and then we will recite the covenant.
So this is from Proust's A Remembrance of Things Past. The only true voyage, the only fountain of youth, would be not to go towards new lands, but to possess other eyes, to behold the universe through the eyes of another, of 100 others, to behold the 100 universes that each of them beholds, that each of them is. And this we can do, and here he names a couple of characters from his own book that he believes you can see through their eyes, and this we can do with an Elsteer, with a Van Toy. With men like these, we really do fly from star to star.
Let's join together in reciting our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life, celebrating our diversity, and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant. And now, if you wouldn't mind rising in body or spirit to join us in singing this great anthem.
We need a paper one?
Yes. You're doing it in. Okay, well, please join us in singing Let There Be Peace on Earth. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be.
Earth is our mother.
The earth is our mother. And it's a song for the children. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this song. It's called Magic Penny, and it was written by a woman named Malvina Reynolds. And I think I want the other guitar for this one, so I'm going to hand that back to you. Thank you, honey. Okay. The chorus goes, love is something, if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. Love is something, if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. Oh, love is something, if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. It's just like a magic penny, hold on tight and you won't have any. Lend it, spend it, and you have so many, they'll roll all over the floor. Cause love is something, if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. Money's dandy and we like to use it, but love is better if you don't refuse it. It's a treasure and you'll never lose it unless you lock up your door. Cause love is something, if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. So let's go dancing till the break of day, and if there's a pipe we can pay. But love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. Oh, love is something, if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. You end up having more. You end up having more.
Yes. Thank you, Malvina Reynolds. It's our presentation. Okay. So this comes out of a book that I just wrote about my dad. He won the Nobel Prize in 2007 in economics. And so people started asking me, so what did he win the Nobel Prize for? You know, what did he do? I had no idea. I had never talked to my dad about his work, you know. But I thought I needed to say something. I couldn't just let my jaw drop open. So I started doing a little, there were newspaper articles about it and all this, and I started to read about it. And actually got interested in it. And one of the really interesting parts of it that I learned more about was about his experiences in Europe in 1939 and 1940. In 1938, he was in Poland, graduating from college. But his family was quite aware that that was not a very safe place to be. And since he was now 21 years old, he could easily leave the country. His brother was, I think, only, 15, I think, so they couldn't send him abroad. But they did send my dad to the London School of Economics. but then he couldn't stay there because he couldn't get his passport renewed because it was a Polish passport. And this was July of '39, and Poland just wasn't functioning. So he got kicked out of England, and he ended up roaming around Europe. The only legal place he could go was Poland. But by the time he was doing this, there really was no Poland. The Germans had come in from one side, the Russians had come in from the other side, and Poland had disappeared. So he was going back to Poland. He was transiting. He had transit visas to these various countries. He was transiting as slowly as he possibly could. Actually stayed in Paris, first of all, for a month. But then when it became clear that France would probably be the first country that Germany would attack, he jumped over to the next country he had a transit visa through, which was Switzerland. But then he had to figure out what he was going to do from there. It was not at all assured that Switzerland would be safe. In fact, it wasn't sure that any place in Europe would be safe for a Polish Jew, especially. So he started trying to come to the United States. We had relatives, luckily, in Chicago. And so they were doing everything they could for him, signing all the papers and writing to all the proper people and all that. But it turned out that the United States at that time was not making it easy for refugees, which he was, to come to the United States. They were making it rather difficult. And one of the things that they required was a certificate of good conduct from every country he had been in for the last 5 years. Okay. Well, they actually excused Poland because there was no Poland. So they said, okay, we'll let that one go. Well, he had really been in 2 countries, England and France, and now in Switzerland. So he wrote to England and France and said, I need this certificate of good conduct. The French were right on it. Yes, certificate of good conduct, signed, sealed, delivered. The British said, we don't have anything like that. Or they actually said, it's not our custom to issue certificates of good conduct. Right, okay. So, which meant no way, right? So he was stuck. Well, here's what he did. He went to the chief of police in Geneva, and he said, oh, by the way, they had already issued him a letter from the government or the police or whatever that he was surpopulation étrangère, extra, surplus foreign population. That was his status, which meant please leave, But of course, there was nowhere he could go. He could go to Austria, that's a bad idea. He could go to Germany, that's a bad idea. Italy, it was clear, that Italy was going to be coming in. He could possibly have gone to Italy, but that wasn't real attractive. Anyway, he was supposed to get out of Switzerland, but he was not planning to leave until they just grabbed him by the arm and threw him out. But he knew they wanted him out. So he went to the chief of police in Geneva, and he said, if I don't get this certificate of good conduct from the British, I'm not going anywhere. I'm stuck in your country because look around. Where can I go? And this chief of police said, I sympathize, but what can I do? And he said, write to the British, write to Scotland Yard, and ask them if they have anything against me. Well, the police forces in these Western European countries did this all the time. They'd have a suspect or somebody that they didn't know, if he was a bad guy or not, and they'd write to each other and they'd, write back what they knew about the person. So, great idea, said the chief of police. He wrote off to Scotland Yard, and after about 10 days, Scotland Yard wrote back and said, he was here for such and such time. He seemed to have behaved himself perfectly fine. We have nothing to his detriment. And British again. And so the Americans accepted that. And that's part of the way he got to America. Later on, when he was trying when he actually had everything he needed to get to America, except a place to leave from, because they weren't flying from Switzerland to America, and where could he go? He finally turned out that the only thing he could do was get to Lisbon and get a boat from there. So he actually had a ticket on an Italian boat. This was before the Italians came into the war. He had a ticket on an Italian boat, and he got to Lisbon. Well, at the point when he got to Lisbon, the Italians still hadn't come into the war, but they had told all their commercial boats, come back to Italy, because they were going to get into the war, and they knew the first thing that the other team would do was capture their commercial boats and start using them to transport food and all this other stuff that they would need. So all the Italian boats were headed back to port. They were not going to dock anywhere in Lisbon. Again, he was stuck literally on the wharf in Lisbon, right? What was he going to do? Well, he did the same thing. He went to the harbor police there. And by the way, at this time, Portugal was a dictatorship. There was no rule of law. There was nothing. The government could do anything they wanted, right? So he went to the harbor police, and he said the same thing. He said, you know, if I can't, first of all, he went to the Italian boat office line and said, could I please have my money back? And they just laughed at him, you know. They said, yes, come back when the war is over, you know. So that didn't work for him. So he went to the harbor police, and he said, you know, if I can't get my money back, I'm stuck here, right here on your wharf right here. I have nowhere, I can't go anywhere. So the harbor police said, yes, but what can we do about it? He said, go to this shipping line and tell them, if you don't give this guy his money back, we're shutting you down. And they could do it, because like I say, the government was a dictatorship. Now, whether they would really have done it or not, I don't know, but it was a believable threat. And he had his money back in 2 days. Yeah, and then he bought a ticket on a Greek boat, I believe it was. Yes, a Greek boat. And finally made it to the United States. So what did I take out of this? I took the lesson about seeing through other eyes. In other words, don't think of your position. His position was desperate. He could have gone into these places crying and, you know, help me, please, you know, I'm desperate. He didn't do that. He went in and he saw it from their point of view. And he presented the part of the story that made them want to do what he wanted them to do. So that's one of the big lessons that I took out of the research that I did for this book and the stories that I told in the book. Are we going to try to do that song now? So I was so inspiring that Sharon wrote a song about it. And it's called Looking Through Other Eyes.
Mm-hmm. It's actually kind of references the Proust quote that you heard before. Okay. We have searched for new lands to discover. We have searched for the fountain of youth. And that long voyage led us to uncover a startling but comforting truth. We can take that magic journey, and much to our surprise, by staying put and tuning in, looking through each other's eyes. So let's fly from star to star to discover who we are. Look beyond our own disguise, looking through another's eyes. There behold the universe through eyes of another soul. Through 100 universes we behold. And as we travel through each galaxy, our eyes will widen, we will see we're part of a much greater whole. So let's fly from star to star to discover who we are. Look beyond our own disguise, looking through another's eyes. So let's fly from star to star to discover who we are. Look beyond our own disguise, looking through another's eyes, another's eyes.
Another story that's reminded me of when Sharon and I lived in New York for a few years. We would ride the subway. This guy would come on the subway car with this saxophone that looked like it had been used to hammer in nails or something.
Look, it was run over by a steamroller.
And he would say, "If you don't give me money, I'm going to play this thing." He got a lot of money. Yeah. I also remember a time, this was back when I was, I think around 19 or so, and I was a hippie, and my parents had made the mistake of sending me to college in Berkeley. And so I was back home for a bit, I guess. And I was talking about how there was a new age and everything was going to change and love was sweeping the nation and da-da-da. And I was telling my dad this, and he was a little skeptical. But I went on and on. He was a very mild-mannered man. He was not confrontational. He would express everything in the most mild possible way that he could, which, of course, encouraged my 19-year-old self to be even more emphatic. But finally he said, well, a few years down the road, maybe I'll have your point of view and you'll have mine. Yeah. So he was encouraging. First of all, he was saying, I can see this from your point of view. Now, I'm not saying I agree with you, but I can see your point of view. I can imagine I can see through your eyes. I can imagine seeing through your eyes. And he was encouraging me to imagine seeing through his eyes as well. So to me, that just shows that this was something deep in his nature. And in a little bit, I'll also talk about how I think that influenced his professional life, how what he won the Nobel Prize for actually reflects that. In fact, am I coming to that now?
You want to tell about, we're going to do backwards to forwards.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So first we're going to do this other song that I inspired, that Sharon wrote. And it's about starting from the goal. Start with what you want. Envision what you want. Define what you want as precisely and fully as you can, and then go backwards from what might fulfill that goal. Rather than starting, I know this is right, and what's the result of it? So,
yeah, well, that was his, what was the economic term for that? Isn't that
well,
is there an economic term for that, or that's basically what he was?
No, the economic term, which I forgot to introduce during that part, one of the things he's famous for economically is called incentive compatibility. And what this means is if we're designing an economic system, let's make it as compatible with everybody's incentives as we can. In other words, there were situations like he was born in 1917 between two revolutions in Russia. He actually was born in Moscow because his family was refugees from Poland from World War I. And so he was very familiar with Stalin and the whole Russian system. And the Russian system knew what was right in advance, and they would change your incentives if necessary, or shoot you if necessary, if your incentives didn't happen to be right. And one of the ways my dad defined this incentive compatibility idea, he said, this is economics without shooting people. Yeah. So, and that's the song that Sharon wrote about this, about envisioning the goal is going backwards to go forwards.
I went searching for an answer to the problems of my time. I took what I had gathered and took my place in line. My colleagues, one and all, seemed to hit a concrete wall. So I found another way, and it got me here today. I started going backwards, and I realized just then the way to go forward was to start on the end. So when I'm getting to my goal, avoiding any harm, I go backwards to go forwards, and it works like a charm. I go backwards to go forwards, and it works like a charm. When I started with the answer, what I thought I knew, I got lost in my assumptions of things that weren't true, yeah. Stuck in my assumptions, I saw a small piece of the whole. So to see the total picture, I start with the goal. So when I'm getting to my goal, avoiding any harm, I go backwards to go forwards, and it works like a charm. When I'm getting to my goal, avoiding any harm, I go backwards to go forwards, and it works like a charm. I go backwards to go forwards, and it works like a charm.
So that leads me to try to talk really a little more about my dad's economics and what it came out of. I tried to read his book. He wrote a book called, the field he founded and that he got the prize for is called Mechanism Design. In 2006, just shortly before he died, he published a book called Designing Mechanisms. So I decided, I'll read this book. It's like a 150-page book. I got to page 20, if I remember correctly. So, but there was a very interesting thing in there, which he said, my ideas for this came out of the socialist calculation debate. I'd never heard of this before. So that sounded like something that might not require any more mathematics than I can handle. So what that is, in 1920, well, first of all, of course, the Russian Revolution, and the Russians were saying, we need to have a socialist government, et cetera, and other people were totally against it. In 1920, a guy named Ludwig von Mises, he was Austrian, came out with this idea saying that socialism can't work. His idea of socialism was the USSR. That's when he said socialism, and that's what he was thinking about. He said it can't work because you're trying to do everything centrally. You're trying to control this whole massive economy centrally, and with a free market, which is what he was promoting, people go to the store, they look at a price, they say, how much do I want? Bananas are kind of expensive today. I like bananas, but I think I'm going to buy grapefruit today because it's on special, that type of thing. How in the world could you get all that? And they're doing calculations in their head, or at least vague calculations. How could you get all that information about what people want? I mean, let's start with this. We're assuming we want to do, and the socialists did assume this, that we want to do the most good for the most people. That's our ideal. We want the welfare, the common welfare, to be maximized. How can you do that when you can't possibly calculate what everybody wants? How much this person might, how many bananas should we import? How many grapefruit should we import? You're never going to be able to get that centrally. The free market is the free market is like a massive calculating machine that calculates all that stuff, and socialism will never work because of calculation. And that was the beginning of the socialist calculation debate. And of course, other people came back and said, no, we can do it, we can investigate, we can this and that and the other, right? And they also, so there was two sides, people who believed firmly that socialism was right, and people who believed firmly that the free market was right.
I like to think of this as, you put your peanut butter in my chocolate, you put your chocolate in my peanut butter.
And so the point was, he realized that two things. First of all, they were starting out knowing what was right. They really weren't just thinking about this objectively and coming up with objective ideas. Ludwig von Mises knew that the free market was right before he ever came up with this reason why it was right. And the socialists knew socialism was right before they ever came up with the idea that it was right. The idea is proving why they thought it was right, okay? The other thing is, they didn't necessarily have the same goals in mind. In other words, the socialists wanted to maximize overall welfare, but the free market people, without leaving anybody behind essentially, they wanted to bring everybody up to at least a minimum level, let's say. Whereas the free market people, some of them at least, said, hey, we understand. Yeah, we may have people begging in the street, you know, but nevertheless, the free market overall is still maximizing the overall welfare, even though some people do lose and some people win. It's still the only system that is really going to work. The socialist system is never going to work. So he realized these people are starting out knowing the answer. And they have two different goals, really. Like the people that are arguing for socialism have this goal of lifting everybody up to some extent, and the people that are going for the free market really, a lot of them at least, don't insist upon that, okay? So he said, what if instead of starting out knowing what's right and arguing back and forth, which of course you can imagine this argument got absolutely nowhere. Everybody still believed what they believed before the argument began. By the way, he also had the good luck to study with some of the proponents. For example, when he was in Switzerland, von Mises was teaching in Geneva. He got to take classes from von Mises and learn from him and argue with him, actually. So he really got into this debate in a very deep and knowledgeable way. And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he came up with this idea, what if we start out with the goal? Rather than...
That's the song we just did, actually.
Yeah, well, that's what this song actually expresses. What if we mathematically, he was very mathematical. He said, what if we could mathematically define our goals? And he said, define them in goal functions, mathematical functions, one or more, defining exactly what we want. And then we have to take the givens, which he called the environment, the things we cannot change. And he took incentives, for example, as one of those. We're not going to try to change people's incentives. We don't believe we can do that peacefully. So we're not going to try to change that. And there were other things, the technology. He said, we're not going to count on some magical technology coming through and enabling all the things that we want to do. And then once you have the givens and you have your goals, you can mathematically deduce the systems. Maybe there's many of them that can fulfill that. So what other people were doing is they were taking the system as a given and deducing other things from it. What he did is he took the goals and the givens as the givens and deduced the systems.
So I think we should probably wrap up. So,
Okay.
but so this is basically what inspired his work and what he won a Nobel Prize for. It was developing mechanism design,
Yes.
using game theory. And so when he was asked, well, how did you come up with this?
Yes. And he said, because he was in Europe at the time when he was developing these things, he said it was really just desperation. Because he realized if we don't figure out a way to he realized that the economics had everything to do with why World War II happened. The fact that Germany was in hyperinflation and all these other countries were having massive, this is Depression time. And that had a lot to do with why World War II happened. And so this was his attempt to bring something to the world out of his own personal desperation. And so I wrote a song called Desperation and Inspiration. A desperation and inspiration.
Walking down the street,
Desperation said to inspiration, I'm so glad we just happened to meet. I am gonna need you to save my sorry rear.
Inspiration said to desperation, I think I have an idea.
Depression
And expression, walking down the street.
Depression said to expression, I'm so glad we just happened to meet. I really need you, 'cause everything is going wrong.
Expression said to depression, hey, let's write a song.
Here's a little secret, they didn't just happen to meet. They've been walking forever together down that long, long street.
Sweetness,
And completeness,
walking along and kissing. Sweetness said to completeness, this is what I've been missing.
sweetness said to completeness, well, that'll happen now and then.
Sweetness said to completeness, let's do that again.
And here's a little secret, they didn't just happen to me. They've been walking forever together down that long, long street.
Ooh.
Desperation
And inspiration.
Ooh. Depression
And expression. Ooh. Sweetness.
and completeness.
Ooh. No, no, they didn't just happen to me.
No, no,
no, they didn't just happen to me.
Yeah. So if you're desperate and depressed, have hope.
Don't worry. Yeah, hope. It's a big thing. Okay, well, that is the end of our presentation, and I guess we're going to have the offertory.
There are a couple pictures that we can show that maybe you could explain to us.
Oh, yeah, sure.
We have one of the photos here. You tell us about this.
So this is my dad. I think this must be a recreation because there was no photographer in there when my mom and dad were there. But this is a recreation of my dad getting the call. The story about this is that the call came in at 5 a.m. because I guess the people over there in Sweden, they don't worry about what time it is. They're calling people all over the world all the time. They come into work and they make their calls, right? So one of the most famous economists in all of history was Adam Smith, okay?
From like the 18th.
Like from the 1800s or something like that, right? So the phone rings at 5 a.m. They pick it up, yes. Hello, this is Adam Smith. You just won the Nobel Prize in Economics. Clearly a crank call, right? So Adam Smith calls back and he says, no, really, it's really me. So this is a picture that sort of illustrates that story. He won the prize in 2007, yeah.
And he was the oldest recipient of the Nobel Prize at that time at the age of 90, and he was not well enough to fly to Stockholm for the ceremony, so Mike's sister and her family went to Stockholm, and the rest of us gathered at the University of Minnesota, and afterwards, when they were having a banquet in Stockholm, we went to the Old Country Buffet and had a feast.
Which I can guarantee you my dad preferred, yeah. So this is the ambassador from Sweden. I forget his name, but it says here Swedish ambassador on the far right there, presenting, the Nobel medal. Is it called? I guess, yeah. That's my dad. That's my mom, and there's some other folks.
Mike and his brother Maxim, and his
my sister Sarah, and my cousin
Sarah's
Sophie.
Daughter, Sophie.
Yeah.
In Minnesota.
Yeah, in Minnesota. It was kind of cool in a way because he taught at the University of Minnesota for 50 years. And so having their ceremony in Minnesota, they had, I believe, the largest auditorium at the university. And it was standing room only, which, most of these people would not have been able to come had it been over there in Sweden. So. Yeah.
And he only lived for a few months after that. He had kidney failure, and it was just really, the timing was, like not a moment too soon.
Thank you. It's an honor that we have the son of a Nobel Prize winner and his wife with us today. It's time to take our collection, and if you are at home, you will see instructions for how to contribute to Buff's ongoing financial needs there. Otherwise, here come the ushers. We're passing the hat. Please be generous. And while they are doing that, Sharon's song, this is one of her originals. What would Granny say?
What would Granny say? Granny, who was last seen in October 2016, believed to be the 105 years old Southern resident orca, the matriarch of the J-pod of Southern resident orcas. What would she say to us? A friend of mine asked me, and this is what came out. You ready? What would Granny say to her children? What would she need them to know? She'd say, look both ways before you go, and don't forget, I love you so. What would Granny say to her children? And her great-grandchildren, too. More than a century living in the sea, she's learned a thing or two. What would Granny say? Travel in troubled waters. What would Granny say to all our sons and daughters? What would Granny say to her children? Oh, the stories she could tell of seas that filled with salmon before the tankers roared and the huge nets fell. She described the changing shoreline, how cold the water used to be, of that blob along the coastline, and of blubber filled with PCBs. The matriarch of J-pod, beloved orca tribe, how did she survive so long to birth and guide and thrive? What would Granny say? She'd tell them of the borders only human beings can see, how she fought when she was captured, and how lucky they are to be free. She'd tell them all the things she'd seen back when the waters were pristine. She'd tell them always be aware, and above all else, be kind and share. What would Granny say? Travel in troubled waters. What would Granny say? Navigating crowded corridors. She'd tell them of her journeys, 100 miles a day. Some days you'll have too much to eat. Some days there won't be any meat. She'd tell them how the notch got in the trailing edge of her dorsal fin, how before the ship Titanic sailed, she was slapping waves with her mighty tail. the guiding light of her family. California to the Salish Sea, she would guide us if we let her, but will we let her? What would Granny say to you and me if she had the opportunity? She'd say, please save the Salish Sea for the fish, the birds, the seals, the whales, and for all humanity. What would Granny say? What would Granny say?
For the last part of this service, I'd like to invite us to think of all the ways we form community, especially through music. What we've just experienced, a topic about economics and world history, and then brought to life with this original music, I think is inspiring. And we have that habit here at Buff to explore the world through music, and especially this month. In October, we are just stocked with wonderful musical opportunities, starting with today. The next three services, October 8, 15, and 22, Reverend Paul is going to be expounding on the theme of gratitude. And this coming Sunday, the Chalice Choir and a special ensemble singing the song Because by the Beatles will entertain us and illustrate his points about gratitude. On the 15th, Chris Giffen, one of the members of the band Revolve, will give us a preview of what they're going to present and how they're going to lead us at the all-church retreat. And the following Sunday, the 22nd, that will be the wrap-up of the retreat, and it will be here. So the retreat is coming back. We had a Buff retreat for many years in different places, Camp Kirby, especially until COVID hit, and now here we're resurrecting it. And it's at this place called Saturna Camp on Silver Lake. Right on the Canadian border, you go to Maple Falls on your way to Mount Baker, turn north. It's about an hour's drive from here, and we're going to encourage people to carpool. And the main event that is, I think, most easily accessible is the day, Saturday, October 21st. And it's 3 meals. You get this for $45. 3 meals and programming and free time there at the campus. You can read about it. And I'm going to be down in the social hall during coffee hour talking about it. There's a little handout you can get that will tell you about the housing options. A little complicated because to get a nice bed in a room with a bathroom, there aren't very many like that, but there are kind of unlimited bunk houses, if you're into that. And then there's camping. And so we realized that people, if they're going to stay overnight, Friday night and or Saturday night, to make the retreat a full experience, that they want to look at that information specifically, and that I will have that handout for you. And Gina can explain that further. the main thing that you can do, you can already think, okay, this will work for me, is just to drive up there and take part on Saturday. And our guests, Chris, Gord, and Josh, they met and they've been doing retreats all over Canada for 20 years. They met in Edmonton when they were in college. And they're very participatory session leaders. They'll help us to bring our musical voices, this completely beginner level, user-friendly. You don't have to be a trained singer. You don't have to be singing in tune. But it's with music, creating an atmosphere with music and with some sing-along, like song circle experience, that we explore themes, especially of nature, because there we are in nature. And I'm thinking this is going to be a wonderful, empowering experience, that if we can just get there and then sing along, open our hearts, that we will have a lot of good mileage for our community then to live out after that. If you don't make it up there on Sunday morning, it's the final bit of the retreat where Chris and his band will be here on the stage and they will present the service. It'll be another music service just 3 weeks from today. On the back of your order of service, you have some announcements. I'd like to call your attention to the fact that today at noon, there are two things going on. There is a meeting of the Social and Environmental Justice Committee, SEJC. Boy, if you lived here, Michael and Sharon, you would be stalwarts in our Social and Environmental Justice Committee, and so much of what our SEJC, so many of the causes that we have embraced here, they have been a part of. Their work with Tokitai and the Orcas particularly, we have been very heavily involved with that. If you would like to just learn about or contribute toward a discussion about where SEJC puts their efforts for the coming year, please come to this meeting. You don't have to have ever attended before. You don't have to have anything to offer, just your interest. But you're encouraged to go and listen, because I think so much of what we do at Buff is live out our principles through action. And SEJC is the arm of our community that structures that for us. One of the big things they do is they set a special collection, one for each month. And they have a very clear process, a fair process, in which causes, organizations that might want some help or some exposure, they get to apply. And then once a month we hear from them, and we as a community take everything that we're contributing and give it to those causes. So one collection out of 4 doesn't go to us, it goes to helping make the world a better place. And this is very important to all of us, so think about attending that meeting. But you have an option. At noon, Bonnie Finney is leading the first of 4 sessions called UU History 101. And this is one of the several offerings that Gina and her adult RE crew have dreamed up for this year. And there are posters of this around. This is on the front door and it's around the church. Have a look. This is your opportunity for adult RE, for adult religious education. Where would you like to attend? What would you like to learn? And this one, starting today, is the first one of 4. So sorry, you have to choose between Bonnie and the SEJC, just today. It's all set up for the meeting with Bonnie upstairs in the classroom. So please stick around for one of those. I think by becoming involved like this, Buff becomes more important to you, and you become more important to Buff. While you're looking for posters around, there's a beautiful poster of the retreat, giving you some information. There's the website. This has been coming out digitally. If you just click on that website, you can register for the day, and you can get more information. Also downstairs, Michael and Sharon will be there. They're going to have their book Can you wave it around? There it is. They're selling their book. He'll sign it for you. They have CDs of their beautiful music. So please follow up with them. Yes, go ahead. And I'll think about what else.
Just on the heels of that comment, I know you guys have the retreat on October 22nd. For anybody you know who's not going on the retreat, and I hope you do go, we are going to be at Village Books doing a book talk, similar to what we did today at Village Books at 1 o'clock on October 22nd.
Oh, yeah, we'll be finished. Yeah, that's a Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so after the service on the 22nd, you can go down to the Village Books, hear them. This is long-winded announcements, but as you see, it's not even 11:30 yet. And in Paul's absence, I just took the mic. Tomorrow night, Reverend Tessie leads her ever-popular Taizé service, which is jam-packed with music, and a meditative experience, way less talking than I've just done right now. So tomorrow night, it's always the first Monday of the month. You're welcome to attend the Taizé service here or by Zoom. There are a couple other things that you should read about on the back of your order of service. But I'd just like to underline that it is through music, I think, that we Unitarians so readily experience this spiritual world. We don't fall upon creeds that we couldn't agree upon. But through music, with its mystery and its wonder, we find a path to those spiritual realities that move us and inspire us that we otherwise can't name or find. And so I feel it's such a privilege to belong to such a musical and music-loving congregation. And I want you to join me in thanking Sharon and Michael once more for bringing their music to us today. If we could now make a big circle and sing our final song, Circle Around for Freedom.